You are watching Notepad. I'm your host Ibrahim Sani. This evening we'll be talking with WWF Malaysia about conservation, particularly in the sustainable business of palm oil. Very recently, the Prime Minister, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, went to Indonesia, his first trip overseas, by the way, to speak with President Jokowi on a host of issues. But one thing that remains clear is that both countries, i.e. Indonesia and Malaysia, wants to continue to argue the matter that Malaysian and Indonesian palm oil exports are indeed sustainable and they are indeed supporting smallholders. Here is a joint conference, a clip that will play particularly when we talk about the statement coming in from the Prime Minister. Take a look.
Berkenaan kerjasama menentang diskriminasi industri minyak sawit. Saya dan Bapak Presiden telah menzahirkan kebimbangan Malaysia dan juga Indonesia terhadap kempen anti minyak sawit yang berlaku terutama di Eropah, Australia dan Oceania. Kempen anti minyak sawit ini adalah tidak berasas dan tidak menggambarkan kelestarian industri sawit dunia serta bercanggah dengan komitmen EU dan kepada WTO mengenai amalan perdagangan bebas. Justru itu saya telah memaklumkan kepada Bapak Presiden bahawa Malaysia juga telah memfailkan tindakan undang-undang ke atas EU pada 15 Januari 2021 di Pertubuhan Perdagangan Dunia WTO, sama seperti yang telah pun dilakukan oleh Indonesia pada Disember 2019 yang lalu. Malaysia akan terus bekerjasama dengan pihak Indonesia dalam isu diskriminasi minyak sawit, utama memperkasakan Council of Palm Oil Producing Countries, dan inilah bagi memastikan kita dapat melindungi industri sawit utamanya bagi menyelamatkan berjuta-juta perkebun kecil yang bergantung hidup sepenuhnya pada industri sawit di Malaysia dan juga di Indonesia.
So as you can see, the conversation moving forward following this is that the Prime Minister is continuing the argument that there is a negative campaign regarding the sustainable business of palm oil in Malaysia, that there is a perceived notion that things aren't as what is claimed to be by the EU, and that the businesses of palm oil not only does support the thousands, if not millions, of smallholders in countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, it also is trying to show that we are indeed sustainable. So those are the kind of themes that we have on this topic. We'll go for a short break. When we come back, we'll talk with WWF Malaysia and what they think on this issue, particularly when it comes to the Sabah development programs of sustainable palm oil there. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. This is Notepad. On the line with me is Dr. Henry Chan, Conservation Director of WWF Malaysia. Welcome to the show, Dr. Henry. Let's continue on this whole idea that the sustainable palm oil business is real and that we are looking at an issue where the Prime Minister says that things are being misrepresented by the EU press, and it's not how it seems in this part of the world, so there has to be some better clarity and better understanding that we need to create. In Sabah, for instance, WWF Malaysia has posted out a statement saying that Sabah is leading the way in terms of how a state government is trying to improve on the situation. We're looking at the Jurisdictional Certification of Sustainable Palm Oil, or JCSPO, which is in tandem with how we are looking at the MSPO, or the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil Certification, which both will lead to a roundtable, achieving the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil Standard, which is an internationally standard accreditation. So let's try to understand a little bit better in terms of the background of the whole situation, and before we jump into that, let's try to understand why this came about, the whole WWF Malaysia working with the state government of Sabah. Go ahead, Doctor.
Thank you, Ibrahim. First of all, I would like to begin by stating that the JCSPO is a very important step towards helping the palm oil industry worldwide to address emerging headwinds in the years ahead. Now, there are campaigns, and we all know about that, as you mentioned, as you alluded earlier, that there are a lot of issues coming out in the European era, but we need to understand why. So these campaigns, they are gaining strength to ban the palm oil products from entering key markets in Europe and in the US. So RSPO certification provides an important measure to penetrate and maintain the presence of sustainable palm oil in such markets. And the issues are related to climate change, loss of habitats, and so on. As well as we all know that deforestation leads to forest fires that happens during extreme prolonged drought. These are issues that we all need to understand.
Yeah, but why do you think there is this campaign that is moving against our palm oil industry? What's in it for them with this regard?
So it's all about how forest is very crucial in combating climate change, and how deforestation happening around the world, from Africa to Southeast Asia to Latin America, is related to agriculture. So it's not just palm oil, it is also about conversion of forests into soya beans, in conversions of forests in the Amazons into cattle ranching. And palm oil is also one of those associated. But because palm oil is also linked to what we call in Southeast Asia, to the island of Sumatra and Borneo, we have very compelling images coming out from here, which is the loss of orangutan. And there's no other icons here or images that can be more compelling than orangutan coming out. So we need to understand these issues.
Yeah, before we brought you onto the show, we played that clip where the Prime Minister said that we're affecting the smallholders here, which may run into the thousands, if not millions, if you include Indonesia, and that some of the allegations made were actually baseless. Do you feel that these allegations are indeed baseless, or do you feel that there has to be some stronger approach that needs to be taken in terms of Malaysian palm oil companies, at least, in trying to address the concerns raised by all these critiques?
Well, again, as I said, we need to understand the underlying causes, and it's mainly due to deforestation. And we all know that, for example, in Malaysia, way back at the turn of the last century, much of the country are still covered by forests. So beginning in the 1950s, in the 60s, and the 70s, as we aspire for economic development, we needed space, to improve our economy. So in Peninsular Malaysia, for instance, to balance the inequity between different groups, we created FELDA, the Federal Development Land Agencies, which actually opens up land across large swath of Peninsular Malaysia to bring the landless peasants into those areas. And this is the origin of FELDA. But it's very important that organizations like WWF helps to explain that these are due to this development is very important to support the economy. And we must understand that the country has also taken up initiative to protect our forests. So I would like to mention that Malaysia, for instance, way back in 1992, in the First Earth Summit, our Prime Minister has made a commitment that we will retain at least half of Malaysia to be natural forests. And we're very happy to say that last year, as WWF undertakes our analysis of the forest cover and protected areas and so forth, Malaysia actually has 48% of our land that has already been legislated. So it's only 2% left to reach the 50%. And that's why Sabah is very important. Sabah has gone beyond this by actually going for 30% of the Sabah landscape to be totally protected. This is way ahead of the IG targets, which is the Convention for Biological Diversity, that calls for governments in the world to have 17% of the land to be protected. Now, Malaysia has gone beyond that. We have our national policy on biodiversity that calls for 20% of Malaysia to be protected. Sabah, as I said, has gone for 30%. So these are important matters that we as a country should tell the world that we are doing our part. We are not just making pledges, we are actually legislating our land. And palm oil is a very important element here, because palm oil is seen to be associated to be causing deforestation.
But do you think it's not causing deforestation?
Well, palm oil is just a crop, right? is one of the most efficient crop. It's easy to plant. It produces fruit throughout the whole year, and it's a tree that stands for 20 years. Palm oil is not a cause. It's associated. The conversion of forests into agricultural development, is associated to a number of things. As I said, soya bean, cattle ranching, and palm oil is one of them. It's at home here. Palm oil is the major crop that's been developed. Therefore, the campaign is focusing on Sumatra and Borneo, because also of orangutan and because of the forest fire.
Okay, Doctor, let's focus a little bit more on how Sabah stacks up, right? Because according to the MPOC, or the Malaysian Palm Oil Council, Malaysia in total produced about 28% of the output for palm oil production. And within this, we produce about 33% of export of palm oil. And that's Malaysia. But in Sabah, it's quite commendable as well, because the state alone produces about 6% of the total output of palm oil production. And with this, when we talk about earlier on, before we got entangled in this whole argument right now, the jurisdictional certification of sustainable palm oil, JCSPO, talks about two big things, which is no loss of high conservation value, or HCV, and high carbon stock, or HCS. And do you think that this is achieving the standards that you guys are setting on, at least when it comes to Sabah?
So the answer is yes. The issue of high conservation value and high carbon stock are right at the crux of the debate on deforestation. Why do we deforest a place? In the first place, there's a perception that there's no value in the forest, right? So let's just clear the place. There's no more value. Let us plant with something. Now, before we go into these technical aspects, let's go back into the government's policy. Yeah, we have already, as I said, pledged that Malaysia will provide a green lung of the world by keeping half of the country. It's not only that. We also have the National Physical Plan, in which under the NPP, environmental sensitive areas will be defined, and where this area cannot be declared. So environmental sensitive area 1, ESA 1, is only meant for conservation aspects. No conversion, no nothing. It's meant for national parks. ESA 2, land that is less steep and logging can be carried out in a sustainable manner. So ESA 3, undulating land, where plantation can be done. So we have policies and guidance on that. In Peninsular Malaysia, we have got the Central Forest Spine Master Plan, which provides a framework for all the large blocks of forest to be interconnected. In Sabah and Sarawak, we have the Heart of Borneo initiative that looks at the same thing, putting all the national parks, forest reserves to be connected, and surrounded by sustainable land use. So these are the things that we must understand, that this is Malaysia as the leader. Now, Sabah has gone beyond that, and I think being a government that are looking into how to protect the industry, which is based on forest management, tourism, as well as palm oil, they need to look ahead, and we all know the palm oil industry has been associated with the issues that are linked to climate change and loss of habitat. So the approach of the state in coming out with the JCSPO, the jurisdiction certification for sustainable palm oil, is very important. Apart from the policies, these precise methods, the high conservation value, would provide a tool for the plantation player to identify what are importance. And these are things to biodiversity, to ecosystems, services, to community needs, and so forth. High carbon stock is to identify whether an area has high carbon content. So if we got all these values, let's keep them, so that the plantation companies will be able to identify this and manage them. And in areas where you don't have SCVs, no value, right? Then they just convert it. And then it's palm oil.
Do you think that this effort can be replicated across other states, not just in Sabah, but other 13 states in the country?
You mean in terms of the JCSPO?
Yes, and also the method of carrying it out. It may be called something else in a different state, but just the method of it, do you think that it can be replicated?
So the premise of the JCSPO is that RSPO is going to give a certificate to the state of Sabah when everything is being complied with, to show that palm oil from Sabah is definitely in compliance and guaranteed to be certified. And if the other state governments were to take this up, I think the answer is yes, because most states have already, the premise for good conservation. I just take example, Perak as a good example. Perak has got a lot of forests, a lot of forest reserves, and they have a number of protected areas as well. And it's a place where, the state government can see that by embracing this jurisdiction, Perak government ensuring to the world, to the government of the world that everything from Perak is going to be certified and sustainable. Likewise, if you go for Johor, if the Johor government were to take this up, it can be done. It's a matter of a government directive that this is the direction we want to go, and this would propel Malaysia, not just beyond the policies that I mentioned earlier, but really palm oil as a commodity coming from Malaysia is guaranteed to be in compliance. And I think we should be doing this, and we can do it.
Let's talk a little bit about how the role of WWF Malaysia in making this a reality. What we understand is that the JCSPO efforts that WWF Malaysia is doing in Sabah include the Sabah Landscape Program that you were touching on a bit just now. This is a certification of over 70,000 hectares of middle-sized and smallholders across various areas in Sabah, including Tawau, Tabin, and many others. And it's also trying to help the smallholders, not just the big companies. How has the effort been coming along? Do you feel that you are achieving your targets?
So, jurisdiction is all Sabah. For Sabah to attain 100% certification requires a number of elements. As we mentioned earlier, you need to address the conservation, deforestation, and loss of habitats. You also need to address another very important element linked to sustainability, which is the concept of free, prior, informed consent, FPIC. Is used all over the world. It is very important to help plantation understand who are the people whom you're dealing with. And if they are local communities of indigenous people, native, when we say they have certain rights, and obligations. So those are the instruments that will help us identify who they are. So on the living landscape approach, what the WWF focuses is mainly on the conservation part of the narrative. So Sabah is a state. We then identify blocks of land, which actually they are not just small blocks, but they are large area. So we call them landscape. We put the word living. So the landscape thrives with life. Wherever there's forest, there's orangutan or elephants, the wildlife will be able to coexist with the plantations and with the forest. So we based on 3 pillars to help illustrate the narrative. The first pillar is on protect. So we protect the forest, we protect the species, we protect the habitats, making sure that these important elements are well managed and protected. So outside this protected space is where government has already allocated, into palm oil and so on. This is where we are working with the plantation companies to help them achieve sustainability. At the end, it's about achieving, certification. And in areas where there's a need for the blocks of forest which are fragmented due to deforestation to be reconnected. So these are what we call wildlife corridors. So at the end, when the whole landscape has all these elements put together, you will see that there are large forests interspersed with plantations, and the forests are not fragmented, but they're connected, and they have wildlife, living through. And this is what we call by living landscapes. It's not an empty forest, but a forest thriving with life and and services. And I think this is where we have gained a lot of traction and support. We have got multinational companies coming in to support the work that we do in Sabah, and we have also have companies in Europe who want to purchase sustainable palm oil from this area. We are also now getting into engagement with our colleagues in the US to find how the big players like Walmart and so forth will be able to find Sabah as a place where there's a assurance that the products coming from Sabah are in compliance.
Let's try to see the cost element to this because we all understand the appeal for companies to attain RSPO status, but there is also that element of compulsion versus volunteering it. Right now, we don't see any compulsion, I guess, in terms of the authorities. Do you feel that this is due to cost and re-engineering the internal processes in order for them to get the RSPO, and there would be some pushback by some of these companies in trying to get certification? Or do you feel that there's other motives at hand right now regarding RSPO and MSPO and JCSPO?
Yeah, so we also need to understand the premises, yeah, how this certification came about. Yeah, of course, it started from the forest management, where Forest Stewardship Council give assurance on forest management that give birth to a number of other certification standards. We have also for marine and aquaculture. So for palm oil, the industry together with the NGOs came together and said that, look, we need a system that gives assurance to our markets, to our critics, that our palm oil is certified, now in compliance with sustainability. So that gave birth to the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. And this is a voluntary approach. And being voluntary, only companies that or corporations that have that kind of progressive policies, they will go into that. But we as a country, we cannot rely on voluntary schemes. So MSPO, the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil Standards, has been developed, has been made it as a mandatory system for all palm oil products made in Malaysia to be certified. And this is when the WWF approached the government for taking that policy initiative to make it compulsory. So by making MSPO compulsory, and that has actually helped to accelerate the acceptance of RSPO in Sabah. So the other notion then is big companies are going for RSPO. What then lies with the other players, the smallholders, the kampong, who will not be able to achieve RSPO. So this is where the living landscape approach comes in to support. We work with the big companies to ensure that everything that goes into the supply chain are certified. We work with the small companies so that they can be group certified. So forming of cooperative and so forth. We also bring the mid-sized growers. So who are the mid-sized growers? Anybody who owns a plantation of 100 acre and above to thousands of hectares, but they do not own any mill, because it's so much easier, right? Plant and then sell to the CPO mills. So what we achieve what we do in the living landscapes, to bring all the three players, big companies, mid-sized growers, and small players together to get them certified. So at the end, everything in the landscape will be certified. So the benefit is that there's assurance that there are things that as a company you are not able to do. For example, elephants. Yeah, the reasons why you will find that the elephant conflicts is because elephants requires a lot of food to eat, and an individual elephant needs 250 kilogram of food to eat, not to count the water. So you've got herds of elephants, they will consume a lot of things. And palm oil is something that they love eating, because palm oil is a shoot, right? So what the companies do is they will fence up the whole plantation using electric fence. So well and fine for you, because you keep them out. Likewise, another company does the same, and another company does the same. So where do the elephants go? They will go to places where there's no fences. And where are those places that have no fences? This will be kampong land. So this way,
smallholders.
yeah, smallholders. So by having all these plantation companies in that similar area, working with the Sabah Wildlife Department and the Forestry Department and the smallholders, you begin to have what we call strategic fencing. You only fence up places that are vulnerable for the elephants. And vulnerable palms are 7 years and below. Anything above 7 years, they won't push it down anymore. So you fence up the growing plantation, you fence up your settlement areas. Then you allow elephants to move about in your plantations. This is what we call by coexistence. And by having resident elephant in your plantations, you begin to identify the behavior. All elephants want to do is look for food, right? And in the afternoon, place to have water and take an afternoon siesta and then move on. So Sabah Softwood is a very good example, and I'm going to applaud Sabah Softwood. They have 2 resident group elephants within there, and they already know the behavior of elephants. So whenever you have elephants in that place, you let them be. Once they have eaten the grasses and the weeds, they move on to other places. So in Sabah Softwood, you can find that there are coexistence elephants. And not only that, I just going to digress now back to what I said earlier about the third pillar of restoration and wildlife corridor. So Sabah Southwood is located between two blocks of forest, the Kelumpang Forest Reserve and the Central Forest Sabah. And because we have also undertaken elephant collaring of knowing the movements, and through the satellite collaring and identifying the patterns of movements, they found there's a path between Kelumpang Forest Reserve and the Central Forest Reserve. Sabah Southwood has set aside 1,000 hectares of titled land for the wildlife corridor, and elephants can move between these places. And at the same time, they have also fences that are keeping only the vulnerable places. So if you go to Sabah Southwood, you find the elephants are living in coexistence in the plantation.
Okay, we'll go for a short break. When we come back, we'll continue on our conversation with WWF Malaysia. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. I have with me Henry of WWF Malaysia. Let's talk a little bit, just a short one, on what's next for WWF Malaysia, what's next for the Sabah state government, and what's next for the JCSPO certification.
So for WWF ourselves, let's just focus on Sabah because it's where our focus is now. Our program in Sabah has in the past have two big programs. One is focusing on conservation of species like orangutan, elephants, and protected areas. The other program is what we call the Living Landscape program that deals with the communities. So we put the two together. So now we have identified, in addition to Tabin, Tawau, and Sugut, which you mentioned earlier, we are also looking for another 3 areas. Because you need to remember Sabah is a state, right? So we are helping half of Sabah now to go for certification under this decision. So we have combined our best programs. We have now have the elephant conservation group and the orangutan conservation group and the forest group coming together to identify how each of the landscapes are able to deal with these individual elements. So I talked about elephants just now. How about orangutan? Yeah, as I mentioned right at the beginning, palm oil in Southeast Asia, in Sumatra and Borneo, are associated with orangutan habitat loss. So what we need to do in Sabah is to ensure that the population that we have in the wild is kept in the forest and in the palm oil area where they are now located in pockets of forest, to reconnect this through wildlife corridors so that the orangutan population would be able to connect to the bigger forest, yeah, and have and food and so forth. So this is the thing that we are doing. We need to reach out these messages to the multinational companies, yeah, to the banks, so that the banks can find that now with this sustainable palm oil coming in, the actions coming in, it is a place to invest. My argument with colleagues and as well as individuals who are following the discussion is, why do we keep the certified palm oil in Sabah and then export the raw material? Why don't we retain this certified raw material and work with the Sabah government to introduce a new policy to attract investments and the brands coming in, to set up factories, manufacturing plants in Sabah, so that rather than exporting raw material, we export chocolates. Cadbury, for example, can set up plants in Sabah, or the deodorants and the perfume and all this stuff can be made in Sabah. So by having this industry set in Sabah, you create new jobs, yeah, high-paying jobs. You have a brand coming from Sabah. That everything from Sabah is certified. So that attract these brands come in. And I think this is a very crucial element that as Sabah has set its foundation right, keeping a 50% forest, 30% protected areas, beautiful areas for tourism, both in the land as well as the seas.
Yeah.
Then you can go for that, value-added products.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll continue on this conversation surely, but for now we have to draw this conversation to a close. That was Dr. Henry Chan, Conservation Director of WWF Malaysia. If you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to astroawani.com, look for Notepad over there. You can also keep track of all the news regarding palm oil and its news on astroawani.com. Until then, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.